Today on Rise Up, we check out some of the latest updates regarding the new believers entering the call of the riser. Stories of the prophets. Who was Prophet Jeremiah? We discuss his story and listen to deep and timeless lessons for us all. A closer look. Sister Saiha gives us a closer look at religion and truth. Next, faith and art. Join us as we discuss how believers around the world express their love, loyalty, and faith in the riser through music and song. And finally, medicine of the Mahdis. We continue the discussion on yoga practices and their positive effect on the individual. This is Rise Up.
Hello, very good morning and welcome to Rise Up. I'm Irfan Alamgir.
And I'm Ardian Al-Mahdi.
It's great to have Ardian filling in for Alia today. Ardian, I think that, we have been talking so much about different things, different topics in the news, talking about the people who are now going to extreme lengths to propagate the faith in countries where their lives are literally on the line. And we are always here to celebrate believers who have taken it upon themselves to look for the man appointed by God, to look for the Mahdi which the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him and his family, told us to look for when times are at their darkest, when people are dying from starvation, where disease is prevalent, where wars are happening, where the news is filled with darkness and despair. And in that moment, there is a shining beacon of light that comes from the Spirit of God, enveloped in a man who is appointed by him. Prophet Muhammad mentioned in numerous narrations that even if one has to crawl on their belly over ice, they should do so if they are to be successful. And those people who turn away from the Mahdi and his banner are from the people of hellfire. There are certain narrations that Muslims read them and it just doesn't connect. Its import doesn't connect, it just goes over the head. But the Prophet Muhammad, who is, he has the title of Rahmatul Alameen, he is the mercy to the worlds. For him to mention that people will enter into hellfire on the basis of sectarianism, on the basis of non-recognition of the Imam of their time and not supporting him, this is something that will take them to a very dark place for a very long time. So the significance of the Mahdi cannot be overlooked. This is the channel of Imam al-Mahdi. Whether you're Sunni, Shia, Sufi, whatever denomination of Islam you come from, you must have heard the term Mahdi. Mahdi is to the Muslims what Jesus the Messiah was to the Israelites 2,000 plus years ago in Judea. He was a man that was promised to come, and the preceding covenant bearer, which was Moses, had mentioned him by name. He was also referred to in the scrolls of Isaiah. And the Israelites in that time were under Roman occupation. They were being oppressed by the tyranny of the Romans, being taxed, being oppressed. And at the same time, they had a tyrannical religious clergy, which was making life very difficult for the people. And now, fast forward to this time, 2,000 years later, we find ourselves in exactly the same position. The Muslim scholars are saying to the people, lock your doors, and if the Mahdi knocks, don't open it. The scholars are saying that anyone who fights against them, or their marjas, their spiritual masters, their imams, they will fight against them and they will kill whoever says he's the Mahdi if he comes after their spiritual leaders. These are the Muslims saying these words, people. These are not the enemies of Islam. These are not atheists. These are not the billionaires. These are people who say the Shahada, who say that I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. They pray in their prayers. They send salawat upon Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. And then with that same tongue, they promised to murder the Prophet's descendant, Imam al-Mahdi. So we are going live right now to the continent of Africa and Europe. So that's a large viewership, Ardian, and we have a very heavy responsibility to deliver this message in this age. And I think if there's anyone watching for the very first time, he's like, what is he talking about? The Prophet Muhammad and the Mahdi and the importance of following him and recognizing him. Well, this is surely the most important of matters. Imagine, on the basis of the rejection of Jesus the Messiah, the children of Israel were no longer God's chosen people. In fact, they became the cursed people, the murderers of the prophets and the messengers. They lost everything. And the covenant moved from the children of Israel to the Arabs on the basis of their not recognizing their promised Messiah. The Mahdi occupies the same position in Islam. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his family brought a new covenant and said to the people, there is a man from my family called the Mahdi, follow him. Now that person has appeared and he has made a claim, Ardia. Now, for the benefit of our viewers who are tuning in for the first time, I think it's really important to give a distilled kind of a clear answer as to how they can recognize this individual who is the Mahdi, who is so important that not recognizing and following him can land you into hellfire itself. These are the words of Muhammad al-Mustafa, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, how would you say, if I was somebody watching this for the first time and I said, well, how do you know he's the Mahdi? There's a guy in Pakistan claiming to be the Mahdi. There's a guy in various countries. People rise up all the time. How many Mahdi claimants have there been on Wikipedia? At least 10 or 15 sort of people have made that claim just in the last couple of centuries. Why is it different in this case, Ardia?
Well, I mean, it's different in this case. Why? It's different in this case because it was a guaranteed promise that a Mahdi figure would appear. So although there are various voices and various names and people out there who have claimed to be the Mahdi, it does not take away the fact that a Mahdi figure must appear or that will appear. It's upon the duty of any Muslim out there who believes in the teachings and the sayings and the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that when they hear news about someone claiming to be the Mahdi, they have to investigate. And why is it then that we are saying that this man, who we call Aba Al-Sadiq, the Qa'im or the riser, why is it that we say that he is the Mahdi? Well, I mean, he was the one who brought to us the news of the way to identify the person who is appointed by God. And, you know, thinking back about that, we have a quote in the Quran that talks about how God does not change his ways. God does not change his sunnah. And clearly, okay, if God does not change his sunnah, if God does not change his ways, then we find that in God's way, he appoints for the people someone who is a caliph, like Adam, who Adam was also a prophet, a messenger.
Yep.
But we also find that, you know, there is a man by the name of Talut, who most Muslims do not recognize as a prophet messenger, but someone who is divinely appointed by God to be a sort of malik or a king or a caliph over the children of Israel.
Right.
And we see something very similar between the story of Adam and the story of Talut. God, when he introduces this concept of a caliphate to the angels, he says...
A caliph is just an Arabic word for king, right?
Exactly.
That's all it is.
Yeah, a king, a ruler, somebody who is a successor, basically. And that's why in the Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah, we find the story, two of the stories, Adam and Talut, you know, together in this one chapter.
Right.
But detailing actually the same method in which God uses for both of them to instill upon them and make a proof upon the angels and the people that this person must be obeyed and is chosen by God. So when it comes to Adam, you know, God says to the congregation of the angels, verily I'm going to place upon the earth a successive authority or a caliph upon the earth, whatever translation that the people like to go by. But because in Arabic it says caliph on the earth, oh, let's go with that. So God tells the angels, I'm going to place a caliph on the earth. The angels, they kind of have an issue with that, and they ask the question, they question God, are you going to put someone there who's going to shed blood and do all these horrific things while we praise you? And the answer that God gives them is, I know what you don't know. So,
it's a very strange objection that God is saying, I'm going to appoint a king that I think is the best person to rule on earth, and the angels have this question.
Yeah, so it just goes to show you that God actually, as a matter of fact, does not care about the opinions or the belief or the theories that the angels have or the expectations that they have regarding the caliph. Like, God's response is, I know what you don't know, which is a very nice way of be quiet, like, I'm God, I'm the one who chooses, like, stand by your side. So I found that very interesting that, well, God has a firm stance about who it is and what it is that He chooses. Despite what the people say, even if it is an angel that is close to Him, that praises Him up in the heavens and is in direct communication.
That's the really striking part of it, isn't it, Ardian? Because you've got these are angels showing resistance to the will of God. These are supposed to be fully submissive beings. These are not like some kind of Iblis-worshipping elitists who live lives of luxury and hate God and everything that the religion stands for. These are angels that are having a problem with the appointment of a caliph.
Exactly.
It seems that if the angels have a problem with it, how the heck are people on the earth going to accept this reality?
Yeah, exactly. And then let's go and compare that to the story of Talut, right? What happens, right? A prophet of theirs, who many Muslims would say, according to their scholars, that this is Prophet Samuel, because it kind of matches with the biblical narratives that we find in the book of the Bible, right? In the book of Samuel, right? Where God says in the Quran, the Prophet says in the Quran, because the people, the children of Israel, they come and they say, hey, we want a king over us, like the other nations.
Right.
So
we want to follow the heathens now.
Yeah, exactly. So then their prophet tells them, he says, well, hey guys, guess what? God has chosen for you as a king this guy whose name is Talut, right? Kind of like mirroring the understanding and mirroring what God said up to the angels. Hey, I'm going to place a caliph on the earth.
Right.
Their prophet says, God has chosen for you Talut as king. The angels are against the appointment of Adam, or they're against this whole idea of a caliphate on the land, and they actually have an argument against God. The people also have an argument against their own prophet, and they say, how can he be king over us when he does not have this measure of wealth, and he is this and he is that? So the angels and the human beings, it seems like both of them are not satisfied with the decree of God. But as God said to the angels, I know what you don't know, their prophet tells the children of Israel that, look, God appointed him. That's it. That's the bottom line. So that's one.
You asked for this.
Yeah, exactly. You asked for it.
Now they're questioning again. This is it's amazing, the striking similarity.
And this is something that repeats itself throughout history, and it repeats itself in the time of Muhammad, but we'll get to that soon. Now, okay, that's one, right? Which is that God is one who has to appoint the successor. He names a successor. He says to the angels, I'm going to put this person, and that's what happens. God says, when I blow into Adam of my spirit, fall down in prostration. This is a person who I appointed, right? You could call it a will, you could call it a verbal testament to the individual that must be followed. Same thing with the prophet Samuel. He appoints Talut, and the people have to obey him. So that's one, right? Is that person has to be named, that person has to be pointed out. Secondly, that person has to have knowledge. God says to Adam, tell the angels their names. They don't know their names, displaying knowledge. And Samuel, when he appoints Talut, he tells him not only did God choose him, but God has given him knowledge and stature. And then God tells the angels, prostrate to Adam, right? I've chosen him as my caliph.
Right.
And for Talut, Samuel says about him that God gives his sovereignty to whom he wills. So what do we see from these three aspects, right? We see that there is a divine appointment, whether it is verbal or a written will. We see that there is this understanding that the caliphs, or the ones appointed by God, must have divine knowledge as a that testifies for their appointment. And third, they have to call to the supremacy of God. And God showed that through the prostration to Adam, and God showed that through the testimony of Samuel, who said God gives His sovereignty to whom He wills, so the people don't have a choice in it. Because what were the children of Israel saying? We have better candidates than Talut, but then God has to come in through Samuel saying, no, I give my sovereignty to whom I will. You guys do not have a choice. So how does that fit in with us? Well, we know that Jesus in the Bible fills that criteria. He pulls out this scroll from a past prophet messenger called Isaiah. He mentions himself in there, points out his name.
He certainly does.
Demonstrates knowledge to the people. People are bewildered. And he calls towards the kingdom of God and the rulership of God, and not the rulership of the Romans or the false Jewish king Herod, who is sitting on the throne. And he
give to the Romans what is owed to the Romans, and give to God what is for God.
Exactly. And he came as a king. Everyone knows, every Christian would say to you that Jesus came as a Messiah, he came as a king. He is the King of the Jews. And that's what the Romans actually accused him of when they were trying to crucify him. They made fun of him, saying, this is the King of the Jews, guys.
Crown of thorns.
Exactly.
All that stuff. Yeah.
Same thing with Prophet
Muhammad. Symbolism
Muhammad.
was very much there. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. And it's the same thing with Prophet Muhammad. Prophet Muhammad, he came with divine knowledge, which I think no Muslim can disagree with. You know, the Quran is filled with knowledge and wisdom. He came with a letter of divine appointment from Jesus in Surah As-Saf, ayat number 6, where he says that Jesus says, and this is found in the book, in the Gospel of John, that there will be a messenger after me whose name is Ahmad. So he points himself out. He has knowledge. And throughout the Quran, it is filled with testimony to the fact that he's calling to the supremacy of God. And it's not like Prophet Muhammad in his time was like, hey, guys, look, I'm just a messenger, I'm just a warner. So like, look, I understand, you know, I'm here in Medina right now with all of you guys, but I'm not suited to be a ruler. You know, you guys vote and you guys pick a ruler from amongst yourself. No, he was the de facto ruler and caliph over the entire Muslims. And that's why God says, obey Allah and obey the messenger. God also says in the Quran, whatever the Prophet gives you, you take it, and whatever he forbids you from, you leave it. So it is an absolute must that he be obeyed because he is a caliph chosen by God. So now how does this fit into today's day and age? Okay, the Mahdi, right? We believe that the Mahdi must also come with the same three proofs. He has to be pointed out, verbally expressed, or he has to be written in the will or document of a past prophet messenger.
Yes, indeed.
He has to demonstrate knowledge, and he has to call to the supremacy of God, and which basically means that only God can rule, and he cannot basically say like, okay, this person should be ruler, this person should be ruler, so go and vote, go and vote, go and vote. No, it is, you know, as it is, that God is the one who appoints. And that is something very clear in all of the Abrahamic faiths with their prophets and messengers. So how does this fit with the man that is appointed by God today that we say is the Mahdi? Well, what we find with this call is that it points out a very particular and important event that took place in Islamic history, which is basically the last couple of days of the Prophet's life. In an event called the Calamity of Thursday. So, just as God wanted to appoint a caliph and the angels questioned it, we find the same thing happening in the lifetime of Muhammad, where Muhammad on his deathbed, he points out to the people, he says, "Oh my people, bring me a pen and a paper, and I will write for you a document, and if you hold on to it, you will never go astray." So now,
something physical, tangible, like the scroll of Isaiah.
Exactly. But then somebody from the companions by the name of Umar ibn Khattab, he speaks out, much like how Bani Israel spoke out against Samuel about the appointment of Talut, much like how the angels spoke out against the appointment of a caliph on the earth. Umar ibn Khattab, he points out against writing the will and says, guys, look, we have the book of God and it is enough for us. We do not need basically this document, and the Prophet is delirious. This is exactly how the angels and how the people of Bani Israel kind of behave towards God or towards the Prophet, which is, we know better. hey, we don't need this document, we have the Quran. Hey, we don't need Talut, we have better leaders. Hey, we don't need a caliph on the earth, we already praise you.
Right.
But God in all three instances says, I know better, and God rebukes them. God rebukes the angels, Samuel rebukes the Israelites, and Muhammad rebukes his own companions in the congregation of the believers, saying, get out, because there's an outcry, people were arguing. He said, get out, because what I am upon, which is basically the truth, and the document that he wanted to write, what I am upon is better than what you're calling me towards. And you guys are calling me towards not obeying God by writing a will, which is, by the way, an obligation in the Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayat number 180, where it says, prescribed upon you when death approaches you, if you have anything good to leave behind, to write a will for your near relatives. And this kind of mirrors exactly why the Prophet took the hand of Ali in the event of Ghadir Khum and said, whoever I am the master of, Ali is his master.
Yes. It's just, and I find it very hilarious how people, not hilarious but heartbreaking, how people just dismiss this out of hand. They see an event. This is Hajjatul Wada. This is the one and only Hajj the Prophet did. This was an opportunity where the whole Muslim community had gathered in one spot. Look at the timing the Prophet Muhammad chose, peace be upon him and his family. He raises his hand aloft in the sky and he says the words that Brother Ardian just mentioned, those famous words that no Sunni can deny. In fact, there are narrations that state that those people who were later to oppose the Prophet from writing down his will were congratulating the Prince of the Believers on this divine appointment. They knew exactly what this meant. And to hear the non-working scholars in this day and age say that this is a spiritual appointment, it means that Ali is the heir to the spiritual knowledge of the Prophet Muhammad. And he is from the Arifin, and he is somebody who knows the religion better than anybody else. But politically, no, Imam Ali alayhi salam, God forbid, is not knowledgeable. And this is the key issue that we have, isn't it, Ardian?
Yeah, it is. Imagine someone like Iblis saying, hey, the reason why I didn't prostrate to Adam is because God only appointed him as a spiritual caliph, but it's not necessary that I have to prostrate to him.
Yeah.
That would be a silly argument, right?
It sounds very messed up as well. And here's the thing, look, to put things as simply as possible for the people who are watching this, it has to be this 3-step approach before you reach the conclusion. All 3 steps must be in place. The first one is divine appointment and the will, claiming to be mentioned in a written document or by direct appointment, for example in Ghadir al-Khum, or when Simon Peter was sort of appointed by Jesus, when he was told that I will build my church on this individual by the name of Simon Peter, clearly appointed. This divine appointment is first and foremost, because knowledge can be claimed by many people. Iblis had a lot of knowledge. Iblis worshipped for a very long time, and he was given the title, the honorific title by the angels. But this is where, again, Imam al-Mahdi, through Aba Al-Sadiq and through Ahmad al-Hassan, has revealed to us that Abalis was a title given to Iblis by the angels because of his ability to create. He was a master creator, an architect, you could call him, and he had accomplished much, and no Muslim will deny the fact that Iblis was amongst the rank of the highest of angels at one point in time. He had a lot of knowledge, and a lot of people have had a lot of knowledge and become atheists and denied the very existence of God. So that knowledge has to be built upon the foundation of a written will. And then you have the supremacy for God, this banner that says that only God can rule through a man that he has appointed. God is the only one who appoints. The people cannot do this job. The people have defective, deficient intellects. God is the all-knowing, right? If God is all-knowing, all-wise, all-powerful, then surely he knows what is the best leader to lead the people. It's a very simple conclusion. And by the way, this banner of Al-Bay'a Lillah has also been used by the followers of Iblis during the time of the successor of the Prophet Muhammad, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali alayhi salam, when the Kharijites or the Khawarij were leading the battle cry against the Prince of the Believers. and his leniency and weakness that they were saying that he demonstrated, unlike the iron-fisted Uthman and Omar bin al-Khattab. Their chant was, in fact, La hukma illa billah. There is no one who can lead except for Allah, right? There is no one except Allah who has the right. This is exactly the chant of Iblis. He wanted to move Adam out of the way and worship God directly.
Yes.
He was a man, he was a being of great pride, and God called him out on it and made Iblis the peacock angel to become the lowest of the low. And he was called Shaitan al-Rajim. And anytime we recite the Quran, anytime we begin any action that has a purpose to it, that has an intention of sincerity and purity dedicated to God, we always begin with A'udhu billahi minash shaitan rajim. We seek refuge in Allah from the accursed shaitan,
yes,
which is the new title of Iblis after his fall from grace due to the rejection of the man appointed by God. But as Brother Ardian explained, when these three steps, starting with the will and appointment by God, with knowledge and then the banner that says supremacy is for God, when these three align, you have your Jesus, you have your Moses, you have your Abraham, you have your Ahmad al-Hassan the Yamani, and in this time, it is Abdullah Hashem Aba Al-Sadiq who is the riser of the family of Muhammad. This is an individual that has been mentioned in the will that Umar bin al-Khattab did not want written, and those people who hated the Prophet and his family did not want written. Did you know that the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad, one of the greatest women in history, by the name of Fatima, was murdered because she refused to give allegiance to the first so-called rightly guided caliph, Abu Bakr. They set her house on fire. They crushed her behind a door. They caused the miscarriage of her unborn child. That is murder. Mm-hmm. Why aren't Muslims talking about this? They want to gloss over Karbala. They want to forget the fact that Imam Hassan was poisoned by Muawiyah. There was a conspiracy to wrestle away the caliphate from Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. And it happened, and just so that there can be absolutely no doubt about it, we have the event that happened in Karbala. A very famous, tragic, horrific slaughter of the family of Muhammad that no Muslim can deny. It's there in history. And don't gloss it over, don't explain it away. Don't say it was a political misunderstanding. When you saw off the head of the masters of the youth of paradise and put it on a pike, and you pierced the throat of a baby with an arrow that could kill a camel, this is not political misunderstanding.
No, it's absolute massacre, it's absolute murder, it is absolute hatred towards the family of Muhammad, and I believe that's why God alluded to it in the Quran when He said, Prophet, tell the people, I don't ask of you any favor except love of your near kin, love of my near relatives. And we see that the Muslims, they at that time, they exposed their hypocrisy against Islam and against the very family of the Prophet ﷺ themselves, by killing and massacring and usurping their rights, killing their person. And it's just insane. You know, growing up in a Sunni household,
yes,
I've heard about Ali, Fatima, Al-Hassan, Al-Hussein, right? I've heard about them being underneath the cloak. All these things, right? They're seen very, very high even in Sunni Islam.
Yes.
But then when you actually decide, hey, you know what? The biography of the Prophet is amazing, but hey, I would like to understand what happened after his death. Suddenly, you know, your whole expectation, and I think that's the problem that a lot of people have, and it is the stone in the way between them and knowing the truth, is their expectation, I suppose, gives us an illusion of character. So our expectation is what, as Sunnis, right, would be that Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman did nothing wrong. Everything that they did is good. the Muslims have always been on the right track even after the Prophet's death, and we have great scholars in Islam.
Yeah.
But once you actually remove that assumption that you've been fed as a child or fed to believe as a revert, and you actually start taking up the books and start reading the pages of history to see what is it that happened after the death of the Prophet, everything that you said is there, whether it's the burning of the house of Fatima, or whether it's the usurpation of Ali, or whether it's the battle of Karbala, the battle of Jamal, the battle of Siffin, the battle of Nahrawan. I mean, all of it spells what? All of it really spells that the Muslims did not obey Allah when Allah said, love the Ahlul Bayt, love the near relatives of the Prophet, but instead they picked up arms and military weapons and forces and people and riled them up to kill the very household that God said you have to love. If that's not hypocrisy, then I don't know what is.
Yes, absolutely right, Ardian. And this is something that more and more people are beginning to wake up to. This is something that we are veiled from in our youth. And I also grew up in a Sunni household. And the way I learned about this was so shocking that I had no other choice but to leave behind and dissociate myself from these individuals who were at one time loyal companions of the Prophet, but they turned just like Iblis.
Yeah, and they turned because of the very fact that the Prophet wanted to appoint somebody as Caliph. Because what do we find? We find that right after the Prophet's death, there was a quick decision where they took some of the Ansar and the Muhajirin, and they decided amongst themselves who would be the next Caliph, while the Prophet just died, and Ali is too busy mourning, and Fatima is too busy mourning the death of her father.
They're always portrayed as politically inert, disinterested ascetics who didn't really want anything to do with the material world, so they left it to the people who had more knowledge and understanding about the way the society runs, which is completely laughable.
Yeah,
anybody who's read Naj al-Balagha and the letters of Imam Ali that are talked about in the United Nations to this day, they take quotes of the Prince of the Believers and talk about it, and his wisdom, his knowledge, his understanding of all aspects of political life. I mean, the letters he wrote to Malik al-Ashtar in terms of how to rule a state, if that is not imbued with knowledge of human psychology and politics, then I don't know what is. In fact, it is some of the greatest work that has ever been written down on paper, the sermons, speeches and letters of the Prince of the Believers, Imam Ali. So to call him disinterested and ignorant about politics and the running of a state is absolutely disgraceful. And you have to therefore look for another conclusion. And the other conclusion is, by a process of elimination, that the people who ripped away the caliphate from the hands of the Prophet and took it upon themselves to carry this mantle are the reason why the religion of Islam needs reformation in this day and age. It's the reason why there are so-called progressive Muslims now standing up and saying something needs to change because the model of Islam that we have is completely incompatible with this day and age. It is because it was corrupted. The day the caliphate was stolen from the Prince of the Believers, Imam Ali bin Abi Talib. That was the day that the back of Islam was broken.
Yes.
And that is the day that we're still reeling from now. It was the usurpation of the right of God to appoint Ali bin Abi Talib that every problem in the Islamic world exists today. But all that suffering has brought us to this stage where suffering actually is a fuel for awakening. You can actually use suffering to look inside yourself, do some introspection, do some research. Why are we going through these hardships and difficulties? And if you can ask those questions with a sincere and clean heart, answers will come to you. Answers from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will come. And the answer is this: if you reject God's caliph, you bring upon yourself absolute doom and gloom. And this is what we're seeing right in front of our eyes, Ardia.
Exactly. And God has made it very clear in the Quran. He said that I had sent a messenger to every nation.
Right.
and the narrations testify that God had sent 124,000 prophets, 313 of them were messengers. And
that's a lot of prophets.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, that would make you think, okay, then throughout time and history, God has always sent somebody. For us to say now that God does not send somebody after Muhammad is basically to contradict the entire Quran that says every nation has a messenger, or that the way of God never changes. Well, then God changed his way and said, like, hey, I've sent messengers time and time and time and time again, but like this time I decided to change my mind. No, this is not how God works.
Yes.
So when we now go back to the last days of the Prophet, we find that he did write a will. We found that in this will he dictated to Imam Ali the names of all of his successors, 12 Imams and 12 Mahdis. And yes, he did write them all by name. He mentioned Ali, specifically Ali ibn Abi Talib, and his sons, Al-Hassan, Al-Hussein, and 9 from the descendants of Al-Hussein. And then he said after the 12th Imam, after Muhammad, the safeguarded one from the family of Muhammad, peace be upon them all, there are 12 Mahdis. And he goes by naming the first 3 of the Mahdis, Ahmad, Abdullah, and Al-Mahdi.
Yes.
So that is why we actually believe in the man that is appointed by God today, who we say is the Mahdi. Because first of all, I mean that's insane, doctor, is that if a Muslim actually takes a step back and thinks to himself, well, the Prophet came as a mercy to mankind, right? Absolutely. Well, that mercy to mankind warned the Muslims many of times. He said, you guys are going to be broken up into 73 sects. Some of you guys are going to go to hellfire from my companions that have innovated after me.
Yes.
And
have you seen the explanations, Ardian, of this particular narration? It's crazy what the scholars are saying.
Insane.
The Prophet Muhammad is saying these 72 sects, the vast majority, are going to hell. This is the words of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the scholars, with their arrogance and with their stupidity, are saying, well, you know, this actually doesn't mean they're going to hell. It just means that the main majority of the Muslims, who are like 90% plus, are all going to go to paradise. They're that one sect. And this is referring to, like, you know, the Shias or the Sufis who have gone astray. And, you know, they've broken up into many sects. But the main sect of Islam, the one sect that goes to paradise, is the majority. It's the Sunnis.
Yeah, that's nice compared to like what the Quran says. That says, you know, that the majority of the people, if you follow them, you'll go astray, and only few are upon the truth.
There you go.
So these guys, you know, that's why we don't take from these scholars, because they contradict exactly what the Quran states and talks about.
Yes.
But now it kind of rings a bell a little bit. Okay, if the Prophet is giving all these warnings, then for sure there's something something catastrophic is going to take place in the future that for sure, if he's a mercy to mankind, he wants to avoid.
Sure.
So when he said, guys, bring me pen and paper, I want to dictate for you something after which you'll never go astray, he's basically telling you, all of this stuff that I told you about, the 73 sects and all these things, you can avoid all of that. And I'm going to give you a clear guidance how to know and how to identify that one saved sect. But then what does Umar say? Umar says, look, guys, we have the Quran, it's enough. But we can see how actually very problematic it is actually for the Muslims to hold on just to the Quran, because actually that was the reason why there is 73 sects in the first place, is because of the people's Quran, their interpretation, their ideas, their opinions. And they don't agree upon the same thing in relation to the Quran, even if you remove the hadiths.
Yes.
So the Muslims have broken into many sects. But now we understand why that one sect can be saved through the will. It's because so long as you are aligned with the Caliph of God mentioned in the last testament of the Prophet, when he says, obey this man in the future who will come, he is a Mahdi named Abdullah, then we follow him. And Abdullah Hashem Aba Al-Sadiq has claimed that will, and nobody claimed to be the Abdullah mentioned in that will in the past 1400 years except for him. And one of his predecessors of the 6th Imam, Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he had mentioned that nobody can claim this matter except for its rightful owner, or else God is going to cut off his age.
Yes.
So it is a protection from misguidance, as the Prophet said, and the Prophet's descendants vouched exactly what the Prophet said, and said the way that it works is that whoever tries to claim it, their life is going to be ended. So now we have that Abu Sadiq claims a will. But we also see that he's displayed a lot of knowledge, whether it's in this amazing book here called The Goal of the Wise, or his series on YouTube called the School of Divine Mysteries.
Yes.
He has flooded us with so much knowledge that it bewilders the mind. It really makes you think to yourself, my God, if like what I was upon previously was nothing, it was illogical, irrational, and this is something that is logical, tangible, and something that it not only just applies to Islam and makes Islam make sense, but also Judaism and Christianity and where they went wrong, what is correct from them, and all these things. And lastly, the very fact that he rose the banner al-Bay' lillah, as you were talking about previously, the very fact that he raised that banner and is calling people to the supremacy and the rulership of God rather than the rulership of the people, all three of this combined in him is a testimony to his personality and his righteousness, while in comparison to every other Mahdi claimant, none of them had ever managed to come about with all three of this, because, as God said, this was a divinely protected matter. So I think, Dr. Irfan, I think that, I mean, just as Imam Al-Sadiq said, alayhi salam, that when it comes to the truth and the matter of the Mahdi, it's as clear as the sun.
Yes.
And I think if the people contemplate over the Quran and how a person is appointed and applies it to Abu Sadiq, I mean, I think the answer is pretty clear as to why it is that he has to be the Mahdi.
Absolutely. It's irrefutable proof, it's irrefutable knowledge. And if you read The Goal of the Wise, it is a fantastic book. And the parts that really draw you in are these fascinating philosophical dialogues between Aba Sadiq, who is the second Mahdi, and Ahmad al-Hasan, the Yamani, who is the first Mahdi. And they have this amazing discussion about the existence of God. And, you know, the usual arguments that are given by theists versus atheists is that, well, there can't be something without nothing, etc., etc. And then they go back and forward and make their points, and then at the end they go home and they're exactly the same. And in this book, in a certain part of this book, Imam Ahmad al-Hasan, from him his peace, the Yamani of Ali Muhammad, he explains that actually it's deeply hardwired into every human being as the God instinct, that we intuitively know that there is a God. And this goes back to the Quranic verse where God asked the question, you know, Alastu bi rabbikum, am I not your Lord? And all the souls testify, verily, yes, you are, and you are God. And that is why the word kafir is used to denote those individuals who deny the existence of God, because it comes from the root word kafara, which means to cover up. In other words, you know something is there. If this book is here, then I just cover it up. And in covering it up, I am denying its existence. And this is the height of ignorance, of course. It doesn't make any sense. But it covers up that which is right in front of you. And the knowledge of recognizing the proof of God is just as hardwired into the psyche, into the soul of every human being who is, you know, that was created by God. And of course, from God, all creation comes forth from the one absolute God, and all praise is due to Him. And it is this instinct, this knowledge that we have been given before we entered into these bodies of flesh and entered into the material world. It's a process of recollection. And as Ardian mentioned, there are 124,000 prophets and messengers. And another revelation of the Qaim of the family of Muhammad and of the Yamani Imam Ahmad al-Hasan, the true successors of the Prophet Muhammad mentioned in his will by name, have revealed to us that there have been prophets to all the nations of the world. You know, you have to account for 124,000 of them, for goodness sake. And you have in ancient Greece Socrates and his student Plato. And Plato said, through the words of Socrates, he said, knowledge is a process of recollection. In other words, knowledge is embedded within your soul. It is there from previous lives and experiences that you've had on this planet. And your job actually is not to keep on learning more and more and more on the outside, but actually recovering that thing which is already in your memory, that there is a God and that He does appoint a man in the image of Adam, who we are supposed to recognize and follow. And so many people with souls in this day and age, Ardian, they are beginning to see the light and remember that which they forgot, that which the system and the material world and the flesh made them forget. And Anas, or a man, comes from Nisyan, which means to forget. When the light is put into a physical body, it becomes forgetful. It forgets where it came from. And the role of the prophets and the messengers is to remind them of who they truly are. And this is something that the Qaim of the family of Muhammad has done more so than anyone else in terms of reminding people of the truth and the reality of who they really are. And we have people beginning to respond. And we have seen an explosive response in the number of people who are filled with hope and joy because they're beginning to remember who they are and where they came from and how to know God through a man appointed by Him. Everything is clicking. Things are making sense. And we here on Rise Up and on all the different shows, we take great pleasure and joy in seeing those lost souls come back home and recognizing God in this day and age through His Caliph that He appointed. And when we see these clips of these people making their pledges of allegiance, it brings so much peace and joy to us, and it makes really, it fulfills the purpose of our lives, because this is what we were commanded to do by the Imam of our time. And it is he, more than anyone else, who is working to propagate this religion that has never changed. The Sunnah of Allah never changes, and what that means is the Sunnah of Allah, that He is the one who appoints the Caliph on the earth, and these are the 3 steps by which you recognize Him. This never changes. This is the Sunnah of Allah. It is the most important thing, and people are beginning to respond. So let's go and take a look at this clip. It'll truly inspire you, and I hope you can resonate with the spirit of faith that is clearly present in the eyes and faces of these enlightened individuals who recognize God in their time and their Imam. So let's go to our first clip, and Ardian and I will be right back.
And upon this I shall live, upon this I shall die, and upon this I shall be resurrected.
على هاي الشهادة أعيش، وعلى هاي الشهادة أموت، على هاي الشهادة أرجع إلى الله العظيم.
Dan saya bersaksi bahawa Al-Mahdi dan para Mahdi adalah para hujah Allah.
I bear witness that there is no God but Allah.
أشهد وأموت وأحيا وأبعث عليها إن شاء الله.
ومن ذريتي آل محمد عبد الله هاشم أبا الصادق.
وأشهد أن المهدي والمهديين حجج الله.
أشهد أن المهدي والمهديين حجج الله.
Şehadet ederim ki Mehdi ve Mehdiler Allah'ın hüccetleridirler.
وأشهد أن أبا الصادق Abdullah Haşim minhusselam hüccetullah.
Bunun üzerine yaşayacağım, bunun üzerine öleceğim ve bununla dirileceğim.
معك أبا الصادق سر وعين الله ترعاك.
لبيك قائل على محمد سيدي أبا الصادق.
Who are out there right now pledging their allegiance and recording it, and that is something beautiful, because now it just goes to show that we are rising in number, right? And
we are rising up.
No, we are rising up. Yes, exactly. And we will continue to rise up. And this year, 2025, is going to be the year that, for sure, this dawah, this call, is going to expand rapidly, as it has over the past period, but more so this year, God willing. And as a matter of fact, one thing that I do have to say as an advice for the people is, yes, it is great and it is lovely, it is beautiful to see that people are pledging allegiance, that people are out there showing support. But also know that in the Quran it also says, will you say that you believe and not be tested? Mm-hmm. And that is the thing, is that life is a test. Life is going to push you hard. There are many traditions and narrations that talk about how when it comes to the believers, the shayateen, or basically these demons, are around the believer like flies upon a raw piece of meat, or like you could basically kind of like say like ants on candy or something.
Exactly.
So my advice for the believers is, upon reflection on the path that you have chosen, know that you could be facing trials and tribulations, and but although that this is the case, know that at the end, with your patience and endurance, God will reward you 1,000,000 timefold because of that. And we see examples of that with many divine prophets and messengers, where Moses, peace be upon him, was tried, and Joseph was tried. And when Joseph was tried and he was put into slavery by his own brothers, God made him into a king. The
ultimate story of redemption, the story of Prophet Joseph, beginning to end.
Exactly. And everyone's favorite, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his family, although he was persecuted and nearly killed multiple times in his own hometown, he managed to become the king and the caliph over his own people in his own hometown. And the same thing goes with Jesus. Although in despair, it seemed like in all despair he was going to die, God took him and made sure that he preserved his life. So although trials and tribulations come, we have to be aware that God does what he wills, and we are meant to be a force, a community of people who stick by one another in full faith and walk with God, just as Prophet Jeremiah walked with God although he was alone. And the trials and tribulations of Jeremiah were many, and he has a lot of amazing advices in the book of Jeremiah that if the people contemplate over and read his stories, I think they can extract a lot of wisdom and inspiration from.
So Ardian, I mean, just these are the things that we as we were growing up were told about the lives of the prophets, and this was something we took great joy in, minus all of the other Islamic history, that's the most important stuff. But the stories of the prophets have been preserved in the Quran, and there's pretty much unanimous agreement about their goodness and righteousness, and that we can derive great lessons from their lives. One of the foremost purposes and roles of a prophet messenger is to warn the people. And they come as warners, they come with knowledge, but they only deliver that knowledge into vessels that are clean, that are pure, that are empty. And this knowledge does not get entrusted to the swine, or the dog, or the people who behave in animalistic ways. This is for the people who truly love and seek God. And this is when the knowledge comes. Those people who disregard the warnings of the prophets and the messengers face the judgment of God. Those people who kill and slay the prophets and the messengers face the judgment and wrath of God, because he sends into the world a light, and the people try to extinguish it by their evil, by their hatred of the Caliph of God. And anyone who has resistance and hatred to a Caliph of God is from the seed of Iblis. If you want to recognize God's proof, you have the 3-part criteria by which to recognize him. Likewise, if you want to recognize the forces of darkness and the seed of Cain, then know that the fastest way to recognize a Nasibi, a hater of the family of Muhammad and the true caliphs of God, is to see how much resistance and hatred they have towards Ali, peace be upon him, or in this day and age, Abdullah Hashem Aba Al-Sadiq, the riser of the family of Muhammad. And I think in the story of the great prophet Jeremiah, who is considered one of the major prophets because he has a large book in the Tanakh, in the Old Testament, he has a very important role to play at a critical point in the journey of the children of Israel. And just as we talked about Joshua before, we have a clip that talks about the prophet Jeremiah, who in Islamic narrations is known as Irmiyah. He is not mentioned by name explicitly in the Quran, but there are many narrations from Muhammad and the family of Muhammad pointing to his vital importance. And therefore, if Muhammad and the family of Muhammad are telling us that this is an important prophet that you need to pay attention to, then by all means it's an obligation and duty for the people to turn to the books of the Ahlul Kitab and read his story and benefit from it. Why would you deprive yourself of the knowledge of the life of a prophet messenger like Jeremiah? So In that spirit of learning, let us go to our next clip that talks about the prophet Jeremiah, what he stood for, what his story represents, and what we can learn from the life of this amazing prophet messenger that was sent to the children of Israel.
Being chosen means a life of trials and tests. Sometimes answering a calling means walking a path filled with struggle, rejection, and sorrow. This is a story of Jeremiah, the prophet known as the Weeping Prophet. His life was a testament to perseverance, faith, and the burden of truth. And whether you believe in his prophetic mission or not, his story holds deep lessons for all of us. Jeremiah's story is found in the Bible, particularly in the book of Jeremiah, and his name is also mentioned in Islamic tradition. He was called by God at a young age, as described in Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations. But Jeremiah was hesitant. He protested, saying he was too young, unqualified. Yet God reassured him in Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 7. Do not say, I am too young. You must go to everyone I send you to and say whatever I command you. So Jeremiah obeyed. He stood before kings, priests, and an entire nation to warn them of impending disaster. He spoke of the coming Babylonian invasion, urging the people to repent. But instead of heeding his words, they ridiculed him, they imprisoned him, they even threw him into a cistern, leaving him to die in the mud. Imagine dedicating your entire life to a mission only to be ignored, mocked, and persecuted. Jeremiah's emotional turmoil is evident throughout his writings. Yet, despite the pain, he could not stay silent. The truth burned within him. He continued to speak, even when no one wanted to listen. Despite the suffering, Jeremiah also brought a message of hope. He spoke of a new covenant between God and his people. The days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the people of Israel and with the people of Judah. It will not be like the covenant I made with their ancestors. I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. This prophecy pointed to a future transformation, a deeper connection between humanity and the divine, where faith would be inscribed on hearts rather than just laws written on stone. Although Jeremiah's name is not explicitly mentioned in the Quran, Islamic scholars believe he is referenced in Surah Al-Isra, where the destruction of Jerusalem is foretold as a consequence of corruption and disobedience. Much like in the Bible, this destruction aligns with Jeremiah's warnings to his people. In the call of the Mahdi, Jeremiah is believed to be one of the incarnations of the riser, Abdullah Hashem Aba Al-Sadiq, from him is peace. In the Goal of the Wise, Jeremiah is viewed as a significant figure within a greater divine plan, embodying the trials and wisdom of those who prepare humanity for transformative spiritual leadership. What can we learn from this prophet of perseverance? Well, there are 3 powerful lessons that stand out. Jeremiah obeyed, and it cost him everything: his comfort, his reputation, and his peace. But he remained faithful. Sometimes our greatest purpose is forged in the fire of adversity. Jeremiah's words were uncomfortable, but necessary. In a world full of distractions and deception, standing for truth is difficult, but essential. Though Jeremiah's warnings went unheeded, God's plan continued. The people were exiled, but they were also restored. Hope remained, even in judgment. Jeremiah's story isn't just about a prophet long ago. It's about us. It's about standing firm in our purpose, even when the world pushes back. Because in the end, faithfulness is not measured by worldly success, but by the courage to keep going.
Yeah, that was an amazing video. And it really details the struggles of Jeremiah, his journey, and I think the people can draw inspiration from that. That no matter what happens, keep on walking that path with God. You can expect for certain that you will be looked down upon, that the people will go against you, but at the very end, all of it is repaid back by God. And we are people anyway that we don't really care, I believe, regarding what the people think and what they say, because behind us is God, and there's no power nor might except through God. If Adam alayhi salam had understood that in the time that he was on the earth after the fall of himself and his wife, I don't think that he would have had any hope, but he had hope in the mercy of God and His power to forgive him.
Yes, and let us reflect on the story of Jeremiah, because Jeremiah has returned in this day and age in the form of Aba Al-Sadiq. What do I mean by that? I mean many different things. The most important of those things is the fact that he has come as a warner to the nations. In the time of Prophet Jeremiah, now remember, let's place him in his historical context. He came just before the exile, the Babylonian exile of the children of Israel, who at the time when Prophet Jeremiah was preaching were busy engaged in the worship of false gods. They were worshipping Baal and all these other deities that had come from the heathen, non-believing nations such as the Philistines and many other gods besides that. They were sacrificing for their false gods. They were engaged, drunk, and committing all kinds of crimes against God and His holy name. And to save them as a last-ditch effort on a salvation mission, God picked and sent Prophet Jeremiah, and he said, warn these people of the coming of the consequences of their sins. And when Prophet Jeremiah came, he came to the king at the time of the Israelites, and he was shunned, he was rebuked, and he was mocked, just like Noah before him was mocked. But this time, in the time of Prophet Jeremiah, the punishment came not in the form of a catastrophic flood, but in the form of an invading army, the army of Nebuchadnezzar, that basically walked through and crushed everything beneath their feet, an army fierce and unmerciful. And they were the manifestation of the crimes and sins of the children of Israel against God and His messengers. And in this day and age, we stand on the brink of the world that has never been as volatile as it is today, where we have major countries with nuclear weapons pointed at each other, threatening each other with more and more rhetoric on a daily basis, more and more threats, unstable individuals with the nuclear buttons under their thumb, coming and saying they will annihilate and wipe each other off the face of the map. And this time they have the capability to do so. Back in the time of Jeremiah, we're talking about very basic weapons in comparison to the weapons that exist today, where our scientific advancement, unfortunately, it hasn't rid us of famine and poverty and pestilence and plague and disease. In fact, all of those things are getting worse. But we have used our scientific advancement to make weapons that could annihilate life on earth by a complete extinction. And the Qa'im is saying, you are worshipping false gods. They may not be the models or idols of Baal, but they could be worshipping some kind of pop singer who is spreading lewdness and corruption in the land. Or it could be some other person who is a criminal and a killer, but he is prominent because he is wealthy in the world, and these false gods are being worshipped on social media. In fact, there is such an obsession and addiction to these things, Ardian, that people are very much in the same way as they were before the arrival of Prophet Jeremiah. And he warned, and he warned, and he wept, and he cried, and he repented, and he asked God to turn away the coming punishment. He was a compassionate prophet. He was a weeping prophet. He cried over his people because he knew what was coming. And the same is the case today. The Qa'im of the family of Muhammad, he stands and ascends the pulpit of Al-Muhammad, and he says to the people, a great tribulation is coming. It is the making of your own hands, because you have rejected God. You have thrust your fingers into your ears, and you have covered your faces with your clothes, because you do not like the message that God has sent through me in this day and age. And instead, people are calling him the Antichrist, they're calling him this, and they're calling him that, and they are threatening to kill him. And this verily will bring judgment down once again. We are supposed to learn from history. We're supposed to take lessons from the lives of the prophets and the messengers, such as Jeremiah, who is actually now more than ever before extremely relevant and important to know. And the life of Prophet Jeremiah teaches us a very simple lesson. If we reject God's caliph, we will be crushed under the feet of an invading army. And this is the consequences of our own actions, Ardian. We do this to ourselves. God is not in the business of crushing people or destroying people by floods. This is what the hands of the people have wrought. This is the fruit that you have reaped. This is the karma of your actions. And this is something that, Ardian, we have to emphasize for the people. You know, we sometimes may get depressing news. We talk about all of the things and issues we have. The purpose is not to paralyze you in a state of despair and fear. The purpose is to make you realize that life is bad. It is extremely difficult, and it's getting worse, and it will continue to get worse until you wake up to the reality that there is a God in heaven who has sent a man who is the light of God in the creation through the Holy Spirit, and he is saying, follow me. Do not follow this corrupt, non-working scholar who sits in a throne. Do not follow this corrupt leader who has these policies that crush and kill and break the backs of poor people around the world. Follow the light of God, for in it is your salvation and freedom and prosperity and advancement in science, technology, philosophy, all the different fields, and to take human civilization to its pinnacle. It is going to be under the rulership of the Qa'im of the family of Muhammad that, forget about space travel, interstellar travel will be possible. And it seems like a very far off thing, it seems impossible. But with him are the 25 letters of knowledge, that by which we can explore the stars, we can expand, we can live forever in this sense, if we choose to. Life is not supposed to be about perpetual suffering and pain and tears. It is supposed to be the soul's opportunity to evolve a higher understanding and awareness of God. This is why we are here on this planet. But if we are being constantly given electric shocks, like in those obscene experiments that were done back in the day, we run around in circles in that hamster wheel until we die, suffering, in a state of great suffering. And this is not the vision that God had, nor does he wish to inflict this pain upon the people. Our way out of this prison planet, is through obeying God by a man that he appointed. It's as simple as that, isn't it?
No, of course it's as simple as that, and that was the whole entire point, really. By obedience to that man, by obedience to the one appointed by God, you are in direct obedience and connection to the Creator, to God. And for certain, God did not intend for the human beings to slave away their whole lives suffering in order to gain nothing at the end except a nice coffin to put their body to rest. The human being was meant to live in bliss The human being was meant to live in a paradise-like state. The human being was meant to live in the Garden of Eden. And this call with the Qa'im is the return back to the Garden of Eden. And that's actually what every single prophet messenger had attempted to do from day one after the fall of man, after the fall of Adam, was to go back to that kind of Eden-like state, to go back to the Garden of Eden that Adam was kicked out of, by purifying ourselves, by obeying the one appointed by God. But instead, what mankind has time and time has done is, instead of going with a man who was appointed by God, who can technologically and medically advance humanity, we end up following rulers and scholars and teachers who are not appointed by God, who end up steering us away in the wrong direction.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'll give you guys an example. Abel was meant to be the successor. Abel was meant to be the person who takes up the mantle of leadership to lead humanity that would be born into the future to a paradise-like state. Instead, what we find happening is Cain, his brother or half-brother, ends up killing him. And Cain goes off, he builds cities, and in the city he builds walls around to keep people out, but also to force his people and his family members to remain within his proximity. And he builds a monetary, he creates a monetary system, and he creates a hoarding system in which he is able to accumulate wealth and sustenance based on a system that he created, while perhaps others would be left without plenty and would be starving, and perhaps would just not have the equal opportunities as others. And I think this kind of rings a bell to the societies that we live in today. It is a construct of Cain, and it is a construct of the inspirations that Cain developed from his father, which is in reality not Adam, and it was Satan.
Yeah, Ardian loves dropping those knowledge bombs, and a big earthquake is going down into the Muslim community, but he's absolutely spot on, he's absolutely right, and he's right because he has obtained his knowledge from the riser of the family of Muhammad, who is God's appointed caliph. You can find all of these secrets detailed in this book with references. The Goal of the Wise is the book that you need to read in order to find salvation and light. In it, there is a clear, coherent, step-by-step argument that leads to an inescapable conclusion, and that is the beauty and gravity of this book. You need to read it. It is more important than anything you will ever read, trust me. There is nothing like this book, because this is a book that talks. It's a living book, and it is a living book because it is attached to a living Imam. And this is something that we always talk about. So, Brother Ardian, you talked about Habil, or Abel, the son of Adam. Now, isn't it interesting that the angel said, will you pick somebody who will shed blood in the earth? Well, who was the first murdered individual? It was the successor of the first caliph appointed by God. Wow, it was his blood that was shed first and foremost on the earth. And who shed the blood? It was the son of Iblis. It was the son of Satan. It was Cain, the very spirit of evil, defiance, rebelliousness. And the angels, this is what their problem was. They did not know what God knew. He knew that the blood would be spilt on the land, but it would be spilt by the children of the one who refused to prostrate to Adam. And it would be Adam's children, the pure light of God that contains the Spirit of God, that would be murdered on the earth. And it has been happening from that time all the way down into our age, until God finally says enough. And he says enough with the appearance of the Qa'im of the family of Muhammad. That is enough, no more bloodshed, and now the death blow must be delivered by the hands of the Qa'im and his companions to Iblis and the forces of darkness. I think this is a good time to go to our next segment. It is Sister Saiha who has this beautiful segment. She does 5-minute shorts of these amazing stories about the lives of the prophets, and also lessons within the scriptures of the religions that were revealed by God through the veils of God. And let's go to that right now, and Ardian and I will be right back.
Welcome to A Closer Look. It's no secret that this world was originally meant to be a paradise. God intended for humanity to live in harmony, peace, and justice. But the way the world is today is far from how God intended it to be. Why is that, and how can it change? Let's take a closer look. When God created the world, He created for Adam and Eve a paradise, a place of beauty, harmony, and peace. Adam was appointed as a caliph, a leader to care for creation and follow God's commands. In the beginning, there were only two rules: be fruitful and multiply, and do not approach the forbidden tree. But when Adam and Eve disobeyed and ate from the tree, they were expelled from the garden, and the world began to change. This disobedience led to three major consequences. Humanity lost its close connection with God. The world became a place of hardship and struggle, and Adam and Eve had to share the earth with their enemy, Iblis, or Satan. From that point on, the world became a battleground between good and evil. Two paths emerged in humanity's history. Adam's descendants represented those who strive to follow God's guidance and seek justice. But Cain, who killed his brother Abel, began a lineage associated with corruption and oppression. Cain's descendants established systems of injustice and power for their own gain, while the children of Adam worked to restore justice and follow God's commandments. Iblis also plays a major role in this story. When he refused to honor Adam, he was cast out of God's presence. Ever since, he's worked to mislead humanity and spread injustice. Today, much of the world is influenced by Iblis's ways, systems of power, greed, and oppression created by people who stray from God's guidance. But there is hope. God's ultimate intention is to return the world to the paradise it was meant to be. The Quran reminds us that God does not change the condition of a people until they change what is within themselves. This means the responsibility lies with each one of us. By obeying God, making better choices, and striving for justice, we can be part of the restoration of this world. Religion teaches us that this transformation will ultimately happen through a divinely appointed leader, the Mahdi. He will defeat Iblis, establish justice, and restore peace and harmony on earth. But until that time, each of us has a duty to work toward making the world better by taking responsibility for our own actions. Thankfully, Aba Al-Sadiq from Him is Peace has built a foundation for us and given us a map to navigate this enormous task. Through his teachings and writings such as the Mahdi's Manifesto, he has motivated us and given us hope. He has shown us that while the task is monumental, it is achievable with God's guidance and our dedication. So, was this world meant to be a paradise? Yes, it was. But for it to return to God's vision, we must do our part. By obeying God, striving for justice, and taking inspiration from the guidance we've been given, we can help bring the world closer to what it was always meant to be. Thank you for joining us on A Closer Look. Until next time, let's commit to making positive changes and creating a better future for all.
Who could argue with the words of Sister Saiha in that segment? I think she spoke very eloquently, very beautifully about the truth, and the truth has really become manifest from the darkness and the lies we can all attest to the fact that the system upon which our global economy is built in the favor of a handful of people who have become obscenely wealthy through the mechanism of capitalism, which is basically saying that let's plunder as many of the earth's resources as possible in a completely unaccountable way. Let's damage the environment irreversibly and build generational wealth for ourselves. Let's literally carve into the mountains homes for us and our families so that we can vacation there, or if there is complete chaos and society breaks down, we have a safe place to go to. And it is these people who hoard the gold, like Qarun or Korah did at the time of Moses, who exploit people for their own self-gain and create corruption in the land through their injustice and inequality. And these are essentially all the systems of Iblis. This is the handiwork of the devil himself. This is the spirit of the Antichrist that is prevailing in land, earth, and in the air. We have corruption everywhere. And Sister Saiha, I think she makes it abundantly clear how you can tell where an Iblisian system is ruling and what the Adamite system is going to do when it comes into operation under the jurisdiction of the riser of the family of Muhammad.
Yeah, so long as the people stick with the Caliph of God, we can expect technological advancements, we can expect medical advancements, and as you were saying earlier, you know, it would be a state in which there is eternal life, pretty much, you can say, almost. It is a state in which the people can actually enjoy themselves and live a life of purpose rather than being like a hamster on the wheel that provides nothing for anybody and has done nothing except tire itself out and then send itself to an early grave. You know, this is not what the human being was built for. It was not what we were created for. And as you said earlier as well, you know, we were created as human beings to experience. We were created to elevate and become more aware of God, to elevate our understanding and spiritual awareness of God. If that's what we were created for, then great. Anything else besides that, it's like, what are we doing here, really? And I think the Aba Al-Sadiq, from him is peace, actually gives mankind hope and gives mankind purpose now, because after all of these years, thousands of years of kind of gambling away our lives to individuals to rule over us. Sometimes they hit their mark and they have done good things. Most of the time they've done terrible, and most of the time they have led humanity down the wrong path. You know, now we can actually do something to change that. Now we actually have somebody who is from God, appointed by God, who, if we gave the reins of power to, we can expect that everything and anything is possible. We can expect that there is a return to the Garden of Eden. We can expect that the earth would be a paradise on earth. It would be, you know, just as it is in heaven, it would be down here the same. But, you know, the choice whether or not we can make it happen this year or next year or the year after is now entirely up to us, and how far we are willing to go and how sincere we are we in order to make that state come to light. But yeah, Doctor, I mean,
this is the problem, Ardian. The system is broken. It needs a revamp. It needs an overhaul. It needs a reset. Now, we're talking about the economic system, where banks loan out billions of dollars to corrupt leaders in third world countries, give them completely unattainable interest rates, and the country falls into extreme poverty and deprivation. And then that leader goes away and a new leader comes in and he does the exact same. None of that money filters down into the service of those people who need it most. But the leader who goes out from these third world countries goes out as the richest man in Asia, or the richest man in Africa, or the richest man here and there. To become rich, one needs to acquire leadership. And this is another filthy and disgusting thing that we are seeing on a day-to-day basis, and everybody knows about it. And the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, that loans out these huge sums of money to people with extremely terrible reputations, is doing it on a daily basis, knowing where the money is going, but they don't care. They want to build what we call generational wealth. And this is a term I used before, and it was a purposeful reason for using this term, because it is a system of the the economic system rather, is built on one thing. It is called riba. It is called interest. It is called charging people that if you give somebody $1,000, then okay, you can pay me back in 3 months, but I want $3,500. It is this horrific system that is causing all of this generational sin, because riba and its practitioners are not only the only ones who are going to face the karmic consequence of this particular sin, which is extremely evil, but the Ahlul Bayt told us that it goes down many generations.
Yes.
So the riba that they use in the economic system to ensure their monetary success and welfare, and they built this for their family going down many generations, and this is why they always call themselves the House of Saud, for example, and others such as them. They build generational wealth. And what they don't know is they are incurring sins upon that generation that didn't even commit the crime. It is such a serious sin. And likewise in the medical world, we were talking about some examples of pollution, Ardian. Right now, there's a headline that says brain implant that could boost mood by using ultrasound to go on trial. Okay, so this thing is basically, Ardian, you have devices that have the potential to help patients with conditions like depression, addiction, and OCD. Imagine implanting devices into your brain. How much money must have gone into the research and development? It doesn't even sound right that you're having these chips and devices implanted into various parts of your body with no studies to prove their safety long term. But this is what we're doing. Why don't we just reduce the amount of microplastics that we're pouring into our ocean? Why don't we just stop the pollution that is causing people to have these neuropsychiatric problems? People who have these issues have been proven over and over again by functional MRI scans to have damaged brains. This damage has been proven in an article that was published in mainstream news about micro and nanoplastics accumulating in brain tissue. It has gone up exponentially from 1997 to 2024. It has been proven without doubt that these diseases like dementia, these diseases like Parkinson's disease, horrific neurological degenerative conditions that make you forget the wife that you've been married to for 45 years, and much, much worse, losing continence, not being able to control yourself from going to the bathroom, and many others. These conditions are rising because of pollution. Why don't we put our research and development money into stopping this horrific amount of environmental pollution that we're doing? The solution is so simple. And did you know, in this country, Ardian, what caused the life expectancy to go up more than anything else?
What is it?
Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin. We've had all these medical advancements, but the single biggest surge in life expectancy in Victorian England at the time of the Industrial Revolution came from safe drinking water. That's it.
Wow.
Providing the people with safe drinking water was more effective than any other medical intervention from that time to this in terms of saving lives and causing people to live longer. Good sanitation. Why are we obsessed about coming up with new drugs to kill microbes? And then we're getting drug resistance and we're making these superbugs. There are so many issues. Mm-hmm. There are so many problems, and it needs a complete overhaul, and the one to press that reset button is Abdullah Hashim, who is mentioned in the will of the Prophet Muhammad. He is the riser of the family of Muhammad. He is called by the title Al-Qa'im, the one who rises to rebuild the broken system that was created for Iblis, by Iblis. And this is the man that we have to support. We have to help him topple the reign of Satan on earth once and for all. We need to join hands. We need to pledge our allegiance. And those people who have had the seed of faith implanted into their hearts by the riser of the family of Muhammad bear good fruit. And those who implant capitalism and all these other corrupt philosophies that come from the brain of a defective intellect and an evil intention, which is from the Canaanites, from the descendants of Iblis, will bear bad fruit. Now, one such sister who has had faith implanted in her heart, and she has produced a work of great art, is Sister Mona from Tunisia. She is an individual who heard the message of the riser of the family of Muhammad, and it made sense to her. Intuitively, instinctively, that God instinct kicked in. And she believed that to recognize a man appointed by God, he has to have been mentioned in a will or publicly appointed by a previous messenger. She recognized that he has to come with knowledge, and man, oh man, as Aba Al-Sadiq demonstrated his knowledge of religion. He knows the Torah better than any Jewish person or scholar. He knows the Quran better than any Muslim, and he knows the Gospels better than any Christian walking on the face of this earth. And he carries the black banners upon which is written, allegiances to God. Only God has the right to appoint and no one else. This is the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And she recognized these three proofs, and she established yaqeen, she established faith in this. And this is what led to this beautiful song that she wrote in honor of the Imam of her time. What a victory that is. She attained the goal of the wise, and in celebration it led to this beautiful song that she did out of her love and affection for the riser of the family of Muhammad, the Spirit of God in our midst in this day and age. And I think it would be a very apt way, Ardian, for us to sign off on this episode with this beautiful song and an artistic expression of love. Many Muslims out there have a problem with music, but if it's in celebration of the birthday of the Prophet Muhammad, or in celebration of the love of Jesus as Christians hymn in their churches, then certainly this is something that the Qa'im of the family of Muhammad, who once and for all ends the Iblisian system on earth, is deserving of.
Exactly.
So let's sign off on today's episode. We will be back same time, same place tomorrow. Rise up to the truth, rise up in support of the riser, and let's establish the divine just state together. And let's sign off with Sister Mona. Thank you very much for the song, Sister. God bless you. And this is for your enjoyment.
كنتي ظللمة عيشة هيمة عيشة ناس ماهيش فاهمة كاتبت جواب لسيدي ومولاي عدد تماني وكان حداي خرجني للنور من ظلامي كان معاكي مخيالي نحبك برشا يا إمامي نحبك برشا يا أبا الصادق نحبك برشا يا وثنا فارق بين حياتي كيف ما كانت وحياتي تولي زيانة حلمي نكون معاك لاخر نفس نكون الروح الطاهر ترضى علالي ونطير لي روحي مش خسارة فيك نحبك برشا يا إمامي نحبك برشا يا قايم نحبك برشا يا عالم حلمي نكون معاك لاخر نفس ونكون الروح الطاهر ترضى علي ونطيرني روحي مش خسارة فيك نحبك برشا يا مامت وحياتي تولي زيانت حلمي نكون معاك لا يا طايم نحبك برشا يا قايم زرقت شمس حياتي بيك نور تثنيتي يا ربي بيك. انت ربي يا نور العالم، مهما يقولوا انتي القائم. اسمك دائم راسم بصمة في كل كون وليك العاصمة. نحبك برشا يا مامي، نحبك برشا يا قايم. نحبك برشا يا عالم، نحبك برشا يا